Manchuriana. And very important, the vessel has to marry the design has to marry the container. If you put this in a basket, it would look pretty silly. So it has to have the right period. This is not a Della Robbia container by any means. This is later, but I couldn't find a real Della Robbia container to go with the Della Robbia. From there, we go to Italian modernism. Now, Italy was on the forefront of modernism even before the turn of the century. People were making leather sofas square out of white leather in 1900. It's becoming really, really big. But they were doing this at the turn of the century. And it's taken a long time. If you look at classical Italian modern design, it's usually very streamlined. It's minimalist, one flower, one medium of container. Now imagine being in 1900 and that's the container somebody made. They would think you were from San Francisco. I mean, this is very unusual. For us today, this is normal. But they're very geometric forms of containers and moves on. By the way, this modernism is very often fused into Art Deco. A lot of modern things from Art Deco, because it all bridges together. It's so cool when you study it. Here are some amazing containers that I got from Windward International. They're close by, and Matt Wood isn't here, but he said, oh, just come on by and pick some containers. And I saw these and I go, gosh, this could be modernism, it could be Art Deco. All you see is a big round mirror and Barbara Streisand, you know, and there it is. And I love using gladioli not as a line flower. Gladioli are a killer flower to use as a mass flower. I mean, it's a form flower, but in mass, you know, and that just really works well. And then, because our season was so late this year, there's still some peonies around. It's July, that's pretty cool. So there's some peonies, so that's modernism. There we go. Before I move on to Holland, I had to study that one. What's going on in the flower industry today is so incredibly exciting because we are really stretching and stretching and stretching. And this is some clear glass with just some of the wrapping material. A lot of the European designers do this. A lot of Japanese influence. They love to work with different mediums and stretching it and making it something else. And it doesn't have to be a flower arrangement. These are just poppies. I tried these. These are not the same as their cousins. I chewed on it forever. Nothing happened. Home, home, home. No. Anyway, poppies and clear glass, very, very simple, and repetition of form. Modernism is nothing but repetition of form. So there's Italy all the way from the Renaissance to modern Italy. Now we're going to, thank you. And being from Amsterdam, I thought Holland had to be in there. We're going to start with, oops, let me go back. We're going to start with Flemish. Flemish floral design is really not a floral design style. Flemish was a period. It was a religion. There's a lot to that. I did that once. For those of you who remember, I came out in drag with wig and all this stuff and did all this thing. And the history of Flemish art is all in paintings and how they stylized flowers from a fantasy perspective strictly for the point of illustration. In other words, they were botanical illustrations. This is very early European. Make sure it's in the right vessel. It could be a wooden container. It could be anything old world. And the flowers all have to be of the period. So I have these, there were no bearded iris. We're a little too late for bearded iris. But while I'm on that subject, keep in mind that in those days, all these old period designs, flowers were in season in a very small part of the world. People couldn't just fly back and forth. That horse went from one town to the next and flowers were dead. So you were restricted to using what was in your area. So all the flowers in here were flowers that were kind of, sort of, tweaked it a little bit, in bloom at that time. In the paintings where you see these, and there are paintings that are 350 years old, and the dewdrops are still sitting there like they were painted yesterday, those flowers were stretched because the artist never made the painting from a flower arrangement. They were just illustrations, and they fantasized about what could go where. So it's like what we do when we stick something on a stick. And so consequently, you'll see some flowers in the very top of Flemish arrangements. It could be jonquils or short bulb flowers that are way up here. And you would wonder how they got there. And it's mostly because they just painted them there. They weren't made. So if you wanted to create something that really emphasizes that Flemish look, this is it. Last but not least, if you go into Dutch historical design, this is early and it's very flat. And then 100 years later, all the paintings become decorative rather than illustrative. Gosh, English is such a hard language. And so instead of making an illustration of the species, it became decor. So when you go into Van Huysum and all these other big artists, the canvases became bigger, and the flowers were much more 3D. It's a very exciting style in flowers because you can really use anything in the garden to make that happen. So there's Flemish. And then from Flemish, we're going to Dutch Baroque. Now, Dutch Baroque, imagine those guys with those collars. You've all seen those guys at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. They had wigs. They had, wax mustaches. They had collars. They could barely move. They had all kinds of metal hanging on their belts. And the houses were like this. You couldn't move anywhere. Dutch Baroque is as tight as the early Dutch people were and the business people still are. So it's like tight. So it's compact, it's robust, it's somber and sober, and the colors are all very intense. It's usually polychromatic, but you can see that this is just filled and filled and filled with flowers, and thank God for oasis. So that sounds like a, but it is. I'm an oasis guy. I love to work in good floral foam because you can't do this in any other way. There are probably 300 insertions in this arrangement. And, that's a lot of stuff to put in there. So, Dutch Baroque. From Dutch Baroque, we're going to, thank you. From Dutch Baroque, we're going to a style that you see in most of Europe, and it's vegetative design. And I think you can see this on the screen. This will be out in the lobby later on. And that is a play on materials. So here is a vessel that could look almost Renaissance. It looks like it comes out of an old movie. But in here is this kind of a dried root, driftwood material. And then in here are some seed pods from Genista, which is your Scotch broom that grows everywhere. These are the seed pods. And as you can see on the screen, it's tone on tone on tone. Here are the papaver, opium poppies. I get excited talking about opium poppies. There's a little bit of flowering carrot. There is some Banksia. I love working with all the proteaceous materials because A, they last, B, they give it all that texture. This is a study in texture and color. From there, we're going into leucadendron, and here is a flowering onion, or it could be a leek, but it's all very vegetative, meaning vegetation, very paved at the bottom, straight up. From there, we're going to parallelism. And parallelism is line, and it's parallel. There could be some side branches that are juxtaposed, but the main line always has to be parallel. This has been moved a few times from, I told the students, I said, it's 5% creative and 95% schlepping. We all relate to that one. So I had a lot of really good people help me. And this was designed at the San Francisco Flower Mart, put in a truck, down the loading dock, and it's in pretty good shape today. So we have some Iramuras. This, by the way, is flowering flax. If you want to see this in nature, the garage across the street, they have this. It's not where it came from, but I've been known to do that. It's expensive. Then you go into gladiolas. I love gladiolas. I don't know why we gave gladiolas such a bad rap. To me, they're majestic. The colors are amazing. You'll see some in Jim's program coming up that are two-tone, that are spectacular. And it's easier to do parallelism and vegetative design in a broader container, because if you have a broader container, you can make it parallel. I always tell my students, it's hard to make a bud vase parallel. I mean, there's one line and you're running out of space, right? So this is all just paved at the bottom and straight parallel, straight up, and that's ×2. A little narrower, but this looks great in contemporary homes, and I kept it all tone on tone just to get the point across. Then, in order to stay on time, we're going to France. Are you ready for France? France. Thank you. I hope you're going to clap better for Jim. No, I'm kidding. Just joking. It was a late night. So France is incredible. I mean, not only did they rule the world, it was all about French and French only, and it's all about French. So we're going to start with the court styles. Now, I went to the Academy of Art after my horticulture studies, and I was going to become an interior architect, and that didn't happen because I stayed with my passion. So the court styles. The court styles are Louis the 14th, the 15th, the 16th. Off with their heads. And so this is Rococo, you know, and I kept it kind of small and realistic. You can make this as big as you like. By the way, a lot of these styles are Palladian on the East Coast when the Europeans came over, right? Maybe not with that many flowers, but it's very classicism. So the container is not quite the style, because the containers in that era are super expensive, and they don't make them in faux. They're all antique, and they're extremely expensive. And it's not a look that people like unless you're from the South or someplace, you know, where they like all that stuff. Oh, good. We're getting some response. This is good. So these are the colors of Louis XIV. Everything was very pale and very fragile, and lots of wigs and lots of powder and imagine you have to see this in the right setting. And I want to wanted to keep the program very clean and very gallery style, but this, on the right furniture with the right gilded mirror, you're in France, right? So all the flowers are period correct, with the exception of a few of the brand new, most amazing Sun Valley Oriental lily varieties that you're going to be seeing in the marketplace. You saw them yesterday afternoon. Amazing flowers that we need to make sure that the consumer gets them for the right purpose, and we just have to give them some justice. By the way, in order to make this very tall, it's very simple. You use those funeral tubes. I don't use them. I'm not really in retail anymore, but those graveside cones. You put them on sticks, you cover them with plastic, and there's 3 in here to make the larkspur that tall, to make the campanula that tall. So you just build it, put it in with floral foam, make sure you water it, and it just goes all the way up. I mean, this is long. There's cattails in there, all the different types of delphinium, spray roses, then down here, dahlias, but it's very limited, some jasmine, some saponaria. By the way, if you want to do period design, you have to know your flowers. You know, it's like a chef. If you don't know what you're working with, you can't cook it. So there is Louis the 14th. This is the 15th. It's always this style. And I have to share something with you. We were making this, and a lot of this was made by the students, by the way. It was a real, what I think AIFD is about, which is sharing and teaching and learning and progressing. And so we were making this, and the lilies were white, and then this maroon color in the center. It's one of the starfighter lilies. Don't call them stargazer, because stargazer is gone and over with. These were starfighters, and they were white, and there was no other white in the arrangement. Thank you, design master, just for flowers. We just stood there, and the students just went, because no one can tell that these have been color enhanced. Thank you very much. And but it works. It's painting with flowers, right? And then here is the last Louis, Rococo, and that was very, very over the top, gilded gold, mirrors, you name it, and then they decided, you got too much spending going on. So very, you know, lilies, and it's usually strange colors like oranges and burgundies and really unusual colors in the French courts. From there, we're going to go to Belle Epoque, the beautiful era. For those of you that are not familiar with Belle Epoque, if you don't like it, that's okay. This is the bordello style. For those of you that saw Moulin Rouge, right, this is it. It's alcohol, citron, it is opium, and girls, and dancing, and no sleep. This is what you get. It's called Valentine's Day the day before. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, feathers, crystals. I would love for you to see some of these period movies if you haven't, because you can see what it is about, what the spirit is of the style. And Belle Epoque is that can in a container, and the colors are, right? I mean, that's what it is. And there's your Belle Epoque. So very, very rich, very overdone, and really cool. From there, we're going to Art Nouveau, and that container is sitting right here. Some of the students from Holly Money Collins's City College made this, City College of San Francisco. This is a basket, and the basket needed to become Art Nouveau. I love Art Nouveau because it is organic, it's natural, it's elements, it's beautiful. And so the ladies glued all these leaves with Tac 2000. This is Virginia Creeper inside out. For those of you that know pottery and the Art Nouveau style, it is basically nature embossed. It is foliage, it's vines. It's not about flower arranging per se. It's just how we use nature and how it inspires us to be artists. And so there's a very simple Art Nouveau vase made in organic material. And from there, we're going to millefleurs. Now, in the United States, millefleur usually, especially on the East Coast, means lots of flowers. Well, millefleur is 1,000 flowers. So here is 1,000 flowers in the country look, which are the typical, what I call consumer French colors, right? You look at any magazine, it is yellow, it is light blue. This is not a fad, this is not a trend at this point, it's a classic. The fabrics are still in these colors. You can go to any Bed Bath & Beyond and still see this color combination of mass, filler, and form. Notice there's hardly any line material in it. It's hard to do a millefleur with line material. The line material that's in here, I cut apart. It's called gladiolus. From there, we're going to another type of millefleur, which in France they call ton sur ton, which means tone on tone. It just sounds better when you go ton sur ton. It's like you have to go ton sur ton. How are you? So here is a millefleur with Mediterranean type of materials, right? If you are in that era, it really needs to be, if it's France, these are all French colors. There is acacia in here, dusty miller, sweet peas, lavender, colors and flowers that you would find in a French flower shop. Or you can go to the famous French country, and that's the Mediterranean influence. When you think of French country, we're going to the French countryside. So I love anthuriums, and I know Eric is in the audience, but anthuriums don't fit in French country. Or I usually tell students and ladies that I talk to in the garden club world, I say, it's like having sushi and putting ketchup on it, and then they get it, right? This is all about being period correct. Those thistles came out of someone's garden in France with these big sunflowers and millet and quince and agonas and dill and all kinds of thistles, and there's a little bit of lumex in here. On the other side are some dried materials. I love to work with dried materials and fresh flowers. So when you look right here, this is flax flower, which is an oil plant that they use for pressing oil, flax oil, but the little seeds are in here, and it really connects to the basket, and it gives it that French country feel. It has to be emoted in the right way. So here is French country. Thank you. Then they all came across on the boat with their starch collars and their girdles and their wigs and, you know, all that good stuff. And I would love to have a day in America when they first landed, when the Dutch owned you. And then the British took over. And This is England in Washington's, you know, the East Coast. This is what my interpretation of Williamsburg. Are you amazed or are you yawning? Oh. I don't think you could make this in a lot of towns in America. These flowers came from the San Francisco Flower Mart, and they were delivered by people who cared. They grew them. I talked to the grower. Look at these dahlias. That is sex on a stick. I mean, that is like, right? And then amazing flowers. Chocolate cosmos, some flowering carrots, which I love the texture of that, some garden roses, some matrocaria, and some algemilla, and all these wonderful perennials, all in the right container. I can see this on the East Coast, someone in Washington, D.C. having this in their entry table going, hello, how are you? You know, that whole thing. So from there, I wanted to finish the program by connecting what we do in the United States, you know, because this is all very European, and it kind of took over, and it's all the colonialists and what have you. But what I love about being in the United States is to work with other cultures. And so since 22 students worked on this, I said, make a dream catcher. Because to me, I think dream catchers are fantastic. It's a totally different style. Thank you. And everybody added something to this, which I think is pretty spectacular. So this was done by 22 people who put this program together. And the people that are on stage, Paul and Dave and Erica and Judy and Tony and Kathy, Lord, give them a big hand. They did all of this. Thank you, guys. Thank you.